Now, the Labour Party claims the double whammy of poorly insulated homes and mortgage hikes is leaving homeowners paying an extra £3,500 nearly pounds per year.
Ouch. Now, Labour says the rollout of its Warm Homes plan to provide better insulation could be the answer, and it could cut your energy bill by hundreds of pounds.
Well, to discuss this and other things, I think, in more detail, let's speak to the chair of the Labour Party, Anneliese Dodds. Good morning to you. I mean, we'll get on to some other things in a minute, but for the moment, it seems really crazy, as it's very warm at the moment, to be talking about winter and how we're going to have to think more about insulating our homes and making them more energy efficient. But I guess we've got to think ahead, isn't that true?
Well, that's right. And I think many homeowners actually are thinking about this right now because they're really concerned. They've seen their bills going up, of course. We've seen the price of food going up, the cost of fuel. Everything's getting more and more expensive. And, you know, Labour's really frustrated about this situation because the government has actually made the cost go up in many cases, made the cost of mortgages go up because of their failures with that mini budget. But they've also really failed to get a grip on home insulation. You know, when Labour left office, there were a number of programmes to help people to insulate their homes. We just saw those falling off a cliff when the Conservatives came into power. We've seen a huge drop-off in those home insulation programmes and those energy efficiency programmes. You know, Labour's been really clear. We know what works here. You know, when the Conservatives have tried to put programmes in, they've been big failures, often because they've outsourced them to huge companies that just don't understand what's going on the ground. Labour said we'd work with local authorities. We've got some really good examples from different parts of the country where they've been able to deliver that energy efficiency in local homes. We'd work with them and we'd get cracking and make sure that those 19 million homes that desperately need better energy efficiency actually got that with a Labour government. That's what we'd be doing now to get bills down.
Look, can I be absolutely honest with you? Because it's not a criticism of the scheme. Let's be clear. You know, insulation, more energy efficiency has got to be a really good thing. Can't knock it. But the sort of headline to all of this on your press release that the Labour Party's put out is all about, you know, tackling the cost of living crisis. And you kicked off by talking about huge mortgage rates and all the rest of it. If this shaves a few £100 off people's bills a year, that's a good thing. But actually, it's a drop in the ocean, isn't it? You need to be doing far more.
Well, absolutely. And Labour has announced other measures that we'd be taking right now to help with the cost of living crisis. And I'm very happy to talk about those in a moment. But I would say that actually, when we're talking about, in many cases, £500 that families would be saving, you know, not just 1 year, but for a number of years, by putting these energy efficiency measures in place, that is a lot of money. And many families are counting every single penny at the moment. You know, again, they've seen some of these costs increase more than they had to because of actions the Conservative government has either taken or not taken. And Labour's never going to do that. We want to make sure that people are protected right now as they're facing that huge cost of living crisis.
When are we going to see, then, what you're saying, all piecing together to look like a really good manifesto with which to go into an election? Because there's no doubt we are now in that run-up, aren't we? We're in a run-up to the election. We don't know how soon it'll be. But we need to start to see all of these rather good ideas knit together into a manifesto, don't we?
Yes, we do. And of course, Labour is well on the way as part of that process. Keir has already announced his missions for government, the fact that we're not going to continue with the Conservatives' approach of short-term measures, announcements that are never followed up on and delivered. Instead, we're going to have those 5 big missions, long-term missions for government. Keir's announced a number of them. We're rolling those out. But we also already have conducted a policy review. That was finished by the time of our last conference. So we're well on that road. And what I would say the difference is between Labour and the Conservatives, we've got those clear solutions, but we're also long-term. You know, we don't want to be just making an announcement one day and then forgetting about it. I think energy efficiency is a really good example of that. We've had so many announcements from government, but actually the rate of these energy efficiency measures being put in UK homes, it's fallen off a cliff The delivery has just not been there. Now, Labour's approach will be different. We know what works. We've looked at what's worked in different parts of the country, and we'd be building on that for the future.
Hold on a minute. With the greatest of respect, to say you don't want to unveil plans and then just see them disappear. I mean, the big plan, the huge plan for the Labour Party was the green prosperity agenda, wasn't it? I mean, that was how you were going to get more people into work, get the economy going, get growth going in our economy again, which would solve a huge swathes of problems that people are facing. And that's just been dropped.
I'm afraid it hasn't been, and it won't be dropped. Why? Because, as you said, it's absolutely critical for our energy security for the future, but also for those jobs of the future. Now, what some people say has changed the situation, which actually was always the case for Labour, was that we've been clear. We've got fiscal rules. Those fiscal rules are critical for all of the spending that we're going to undertake. You know, we've said for many months, in fact, well over a year now, Rachel Reeves has said that Labour will make sure that we will cost every single spending commitment, but also that we will make sure that debt is going down as a proportion of GDP, so as a proportion of our country's economic output. And Rachel has been very, very clear that every item of spending, as I said, is going to be consistent with those fiscal rules, because until we have that strong and stable economy, the strong and stable economy that we've not seen under the Conservatives, we're not going to be able to deliver that change that's so important for people. So we're absolutely committed to see that delivery of those new green jobs, but we're going to do that with a strong and secure economy. And of course, it's got harder to deliver that economy recently because of the crisis created by the Conservatives. But we're going to be upfront and honest with people about that.
Well, you say it hasn't been dropped, but what you're now saying is, well, you can't actually do it when you come to power. I mean, I was talking to Barry Gardiner on Wednesday, and of course, former Shadow Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, and he was saying this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I need to speak to Rachel about this because we should be cracking on with it if we get into power.
Well, we are, but we're also being completely crystal clear with the public that we're not going to say, in a situation where the Conservatives have crashed our economy, that we won't prioritise getting that economy on a strong and stable footing. It's absolutely right for Rachel Reeves to do that. We are determined to deliver on that climate investment pledge. But what Rachel said was, because of the damage that's been done to the economy, we're not going to be able to put that in place immediately. We are going to have to build up to it, but we are determined to deliver on it absolutely as soon as we can, and certainly within the phase of a first period of Labour government. And why have we said that? Because our country needs those jobs of the future. We've not seen them being prioritised by the Conservatives. And as you'd expect, I talk with a lot of businesses. They're really frustrated because right now they're seeing jobs that could be coming to our country, going to other countries. It's not just because of the fact that the Conservatives don't have anything like Labour's climate investment pledge. It's because the Conservatives don't have an industrial policy either. It's because they don't have a long-term plan for taxation like Labour does, getting rid of business rates. There's no long-termism from the Conservatives, and that's really costing our country jobs.
As chair of the Labour Party, what do you make of what's happening within the Tories at the moment? And particularly, what do you think of the Privileges Committee report? Do you think it was out to get him?
Well, quite the opposite, actually. And of course, there was a majority of Conservatives on that report, more Conservatives than Labour MPs sitting on that committee that produced that report. It was one that was conducted very carefully, and I think its findings are damning. And they really indicate that Boris Johnson was a lawbreaker, but also that he was a liar, that he misled Parliament. Now it's down to Rishi Sunak to actually show some backbone. He's not shown backbone on this so far. The taxpayers picked up Boris Johnson's legal bill. Rishi Sunak has shown himself to be unwilling to stand up to egos in his party until now. Well, what he needs to do is to be really clear that he will make sure there's a vote on that report next week, that he's actually going to stand up to Boris Johnson. He shouldn't, of course, have approved Boris Johnson's honours list either, knowing about all of that law breaking, when, of course, he was right next to Boris Johnson for a lot of that time when he was serving as Chancellor. So, really big questions for Rishi Sunak over this. And as I said, he's got to show some backbone. We've got so much psychodrama still in the Conservative Party when it should be focused on delivering the people's priorities.
Was Chris Bryant, as chair of that Privileges Committee, right to recuse himself because of things he'd already said about Boris Johnson? Was he right to recuse himself? And if so, why didn't Harriet Harman for saying basically the same things?
Well, actually, the membership of that Privileges Committee, and of course it's a body of Parliament, that membership was actually approved by Parliament. OK, so all MPs supported that. That included Conservative MPs, and of course there's a majority of Conservative MPs in the House of Commons. So this really is a case, I'm afraid, of Boris Johnson trying desperately to find some kind of reason for him to knock the conclusions of the report. But there isn't a reason. This was conducted absolutely according to the rules. And what Boris Johnson should do is really look at why he misled Parliament at that time. He should consider the impact of all of this on those families who followed the rules, often at huge personal cost. And he should also, frankly, pay back to the taxpayer all of the money that every single one of us have been paying into his legal fund. And as I said, Rishi Sunak needs to actually stand up to Boris Johnson for once on this.
OK, Anneliese Dodds, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.